Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, this will be the recorded lecture of our next topic, which will be the carbohydrates. Okay, so when we say carbohydrates, these are the sugar molecules, no? Okay, so as we are all familiar with, carbohydrates are usually found in the sugar, starch, or fiber. So now let us discuss this in detail. Okay, so we have here first the biochemical substances. Now, what are these biochemical substances? So, these are chemical substances, of course, which are found in the living organism. So, check lang natin kung saan ba belong si carbohydrate. So, biochemical substances, meron siyang two groups. So, it is divided into two groups. So, merong bioinorganic substance and bioorganic substance. Again, doon sa ating review, we mentioned that bioorganic substances, these are substances that do not contain carbon, while bioorganic substances, these are substances which contains carbon. Okay, so sa bioorganic substances, water included, merong water, which is about 70% of our body, and some of the inorganic salts, which covers about 5% of the body. So, ang magiging coverage natin for this lecture will be the carbohydrate, which makes up 2% total um total amount in our body. So, ano ba yung carbohydrate? So, again, these are the sugar molecules, or these are the most abundant class of bioinorganic molecules on planet Earth. Okay, so bakit? So, merong iba't ibang forms ng carbohydrate. For example, carbohydrate which are in the form of cotton and linen, these are usually used for clothing, no? So, these are just some additional information. There are also carbohydrate in the form of wood, which are used for shelter and heating or making up paper. So, okay, so for you to be able to follow the discussion, you can actually open this on your reference book. This is on chapter 18, carbohydrates. So all of the discussion that will be covered in this recorded lecture are found on your reference book, chapter 18, carbohydrates. And now going back, in carbohydrates sa plants, there are two main sources. So we have starch and cellulose. Okay, cellulose, this serves as a structural element, and starch provide energy. So meron tayong different function of carbohydrates in the human body. Okay, so these functions are very important. As much as possible, you have to, if not memorize this, you have to familiarize this, no? So in human body, these are the major function of carbohydrate. Carbohydrate, oxidation, this provides energy. Okay, so carbohydrate in a storage form. Okay, so this forms the glycogen, which is important to provide short-term energy reserve. Carbohydrate also supply carbon atom from the synthesis of other biochemical substances, which is protein, lipid, and nucleic acid. Okay, so we will discuss this correlation further on the different chapter. For example, meron tayo ditong number 5, carbohydrate, which is linked to lipid, which will be discussed on the next chapter. Okay, so these are structural component of the cell membrane. Another important function is that carbohydrate forms a part of structural framework of DNA and RNA molecules. So this will be discussed on the nucleic acid discussion, and carbohydrate is also linked to protein and in function in a variety of cell and cell molecule recognition. Okay, so let us now continue on the classifications of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates can be classified according to their molecular sizes. So again, this is found in your reference book. I'll read this. So carbohydrate is a polyhydroxyaldehyde, a polyhydroxyketone, or a compound which yields polyhydroxyaldehyde or polyhydroxyketones upon hydrolysis. So this is very confusing, no? This is just for you to further understand. Okay, so this is the functional group wherein carbohydrates are also included. Okay, so the carboxyhydrate glucose is again a polyhydroxyaldehyde, and the carbohydrate fructose is a polyhydroxyketones. Okay, so we will be understanding this as we go on our discussion. So the general formula for carbohydrate can be written on this form. Okay, so this is the general, sorry. So this is the general dito formula for carbohydrate, no? Okay, so carbohydrates again can be classified according to their molecular size. Okay, so we have the monosaccharides, oligosaccharides, and polygosaccharides. So monosaccharides, these are carbohydrate which contain a single polyhydroxyaldehyde. An oligosaccharide, these are carbohydrate which contains 2 or up to 10 monosaccharides units. Okay, so what is disaccharides? These are the most common type of oligosaccharides. These are carbohydrate which contains 2 monosaccharides units covalently bonded to each other. And lastly, we have polysaccharide, which is a polymeric carbonate that contains many monosaccharides unit covalently bonded to each other. Okay, so for easier understanding, no, monosaccharide and disaccharide, these are the type of simple sugar. While polysaccharide, these are complex sugar. So ano bang example ng mga monosaccharides? For us to remember this easier. So these are the glucose, fructose, and galactose. Again, examples of monosaccharides are the glucose, fructose, and galactose. Disaccharides, these are the maltose, lactose, and sucrose. And polysaccharides are starch, fiber, and glycogen. So we will go through some of these types of carbohydrates along with our lecture. But before discussing the different types of carbohydrates, let us first look over or discuss the structure of carbohydrates. So, discuss muna natin what is this chirality or the handedness in molecules. Okay, so any organic molecules which contains a carbon atom with 4 different groups attached to it in a tetrahedral orientation possesses handedness. Such carbon atom is called chiral center. So what is this chiral center? This is an atom in a molecule which has 4 different groups that are tetrahedrally bonded to it. Okay, so ano ibig sabihin? Meron pong okay, so wait, I'll show a picture. Ayaw mag-move. Okay, so if you would remember during our review, the discussion wherein we discussed the carbon that has 4 valence bonding. So it is something like that, no? Meron siyang chiral center. The chiral, ayaw move. The chiral center is this one, for example. So we have here the carbon, which is the chiral center of the carbohydrate. So ano ba tong chiral molecule na to? This is a molecule whose mirror image are not superimposable. So when we say superimposable, they look alike. So these are image. Okay, so the look alike or coincides at all points when the image are laid upon each other. So for example, a dinner plate with no design feature has a superimposable image. Okay, so ano bang ibig sabihin nitong dinidiscuss natin na chiral center? So these are superimposable mirror image. So eto. So these are images again that coincides at all points when the image are laid upon each other. So these are structure which can be placed on top of the other structure and look at the same. So an example nito is our hands, no? So this is the ability of an object to be placed over another object, and it would actually look in a way that both will be visible. So, for example, pagka pinagpatong mo yung hands mo, they look the same but they are not exactly the same. Okay, gets po ba? So, this is the example of superimposable. Another example which are found in your book, ayun nga, a dinner plate with no design feature. This has a superimposable mirror image. Now, what are non-superimposable mirror image? These are image where all points coincides when the image are laid upon each other. Okay, so for example, human hands are non-superimposable mirror images, no? Okay, so as you can see, the person's left hand and right hands are not superimposable upon each other. So, i-correlate natin ito sa ating carbohydrate structure. Okay, so for an example, let us further discuss non-superimposable. Okay, so the mirror image form, you can see here, this is an example of structure of bromchloroiodimethane, no? So this is non-superimposable. Okay, so if you would see this structure, all of its parts are visible. Now, if you would notice, so they are similar. So it would have similarities, but they are not actually exactly the same. Okay, so this concept na pinag-uusapan natin, the superimposable and non-superimposable, this is a mirror image concept, no? So this is actually the key to understand the molecular of handedness. So all objects, including all molecules, have a mirror image. So ano ba tong mirror image? This is the reflection of an object in a mirror. Okay, objects can be divided again into two classes. So what are these again? The superimposable mirror image and the non-superimposable mirror image. Okay, so let us take a look at this for example, letter A. So chiral center. So paano natin nahanapin yung chiral center? Again, what is a chiral center? Okay, so this is an atom molecule which has four different groups tetrahedrally bonded to it. So meaning it need to have four bonding of atom. Okay, so chiral molecule again is a molecule whose mirror image are not superimposable. So let us take a look at this example, A, B, and C. Okay, so A, this is an example of a chiral center. So this carbon right here is an indication of a chiral center. Why? Because there is four different groups which are attached to the carbon. So what are these four different groups? CH3 is attached to carbon. Carbon has here an attachment of hydrogen. And also it has here an attachment of Cl and another CH2, which makes it into four tetrahedral bonding of atom. Okay, so now letter B, this is not considered as a chiral center because the carbon atom is attached to only three groups. Meron siyang double bonding on the oxygen, but it is only attached into three groups. So, 1, 2, 3. For the structure to have a chiral center, it needs to be tetrahedrally bonded to a 4 atom. Another example, this one is also not a tetrahedral group because two of the groups attached to carbons are identical. So, kung makikita mo, carbon are attached to CH2 in here and another CH2. So, meaning, hindi siya, chiral center because these both are identical. Okay, so in letter D, this is also a has the presence of chiral center kasi chirality rules also for the ring carbon is the same for a cyclic carbon. So if you will notice, the third group would obtain a clockwise, no? So we're in CH2 another CH2 and another CH2 are bonded in the first uh, carbon atom. Okay, so both of this chiral group have a bonding of 4 tetrahedrally bonded atoms. Okay, so you can practice familiarizing yourself with the carbon atom. Again, these examples are included in your book. Also, the rationale, which I have just mentioned. And meron po tayong mga practice activity na you can use in your book to familiarize yourself more with the structure of carbohydrates. Okay, next, let us discuss stereoisomerism, which are the enantiomers, and diastereomers. Stereoisomerisms, these are isomers which have the same molecular and structural formulas but differ in the orientation of atom in space. Stereoisomers can be divided into two types. So these are the enantiomers and diastereomers. So what are the enantiomers? These are stereoisomers whose molecules are non-superimposable, mirror image of each other. So left and right-handed forms of a molecule with a single chiral center are enantiomers. Another is diastereomers. These are stereomers whose molecules are not mirror image of each other. Cis-trans isomers are example of diastereomers. Okay, so ano ba ibig sabihin nitong enantiomers? So enantiomers, this comes from the Greek word which means enasios, meaning opposite, no? It actually means an opposite. Okay, so we have here an example of enantiomers and diastereomers. So enantiomers again, these are type of stereoisomers whose molecules are non-superimposable. So kung titignan mo itong example ng structure natin dito, when we say non-superimposable, again, these are left-handed and in right-handed forms of molecules. So pag pinagpatong mo tong dalawang to, parang kaya siya tinawag na handedness or kaya ginamit na example yung hand. So, pag pinagpatong mo sila, they would actually look the same. So, we have H here, H atom here, and also the same carbon atoms in here. Okay, so they would look the same. But if titignan mo yung structure nila sa ganito, they are in similars, no? So, these are molecules that are non-superimposable, mirror image of one another, of each other. So, while these diastereomers, these are non-mirror image. Okay, so these are non-mirror image, these are non-identical stereoisomers. So, these molecules are not mirror image of each other. Okay, so how could we identify if the molecule is an enantiomers or diastereomers? So we have here the Fisher projection formula. What is this? This is a two-dimensional structural notation for showing the spatial arrangement of groups about chiral center in molecules. So how could we identify? Number one question, does the molecule have the same molecular formula? If no, these are not isomers. If they don't have the same molecular formula, syempre, these are not called isomers. If yes, of course, these are isomers. Why? Because isomers are molecules which have the same molecular formula. Next, are the atoms bonded in the same order in two molecules? If yes, these are considered stereoisomers. If they are not bonded in the same order, these are molecules are constitutional isomers. Now, are the molecules non-superimposable mirror image? Yes, these are enantiomers. And if these are not superimposable, meaning they are not identical, these are called these are the molecules that are diastereomers. So in the Fisher projection formula, chiral center is represented as the intersection of vertical and horizontal lines. So ano yung itsura nun? vertical and horizontal lines. So, always assume or that meron tayo ditong chiral center. Nandito po lagi ang carbon atom. Okay, so the atom at the chiral center, which is almost always carbon atom, it is not explicitly shown. But you, nasa center siya ng vertical line and horizontal line. Okay, so in the Fisher projection formula, okay, so it is said that the vertical line from the chiral center represent the bonds to the groups directed into the printed page. Horizontal lines are forms or it forms the chiral center which represents the bond directed out of the printed page. So let us use, for example, glyceraldehyde. So glyceraldehyde, in Fisher projection formulas, meron siyang two enantiomers. So this is the L-glyceraldehyde and D-glyceraldehyde. If you would notice, L and D. Okay, so if you would notice in the D-glyceraldehyde, the OH group is located at the right side of the chiral center. Okay, so chiral center, we have the carbon here, and the OH group is located on the right side of the OH group. Okay, and the L-glyceraldehyde. Okay, so the OH group is located on the left side, or this is an example of left-handed isomer. Okay, so in your reference book, I want you to study the examples, no? Merong answer doon. There are answers para dun sa mga example, question example. So I want you to check on page 563. Okay, so there's an example in 18 table 18.2. So para magawa nyo yung or para ma-visualize nyo kung anong kung paano i-drawing yung structure. So I want you to take a look at this example and try to answer it. Meron pong exam or merong questions, merong answer na nandoon sa baba. Okay, so this is table 18.2, page 563, chapter 18. Okay, so let us now move on to the classification of monosaccharide. So monosaccharide are again usually often called sugars. Okay, so A3, take note, A3 carbon monosaccharide, these are called the triose. And those that contain 4 monosaccharide, these are called tetrose. 5 monosaccharide, these are the pentoses. And 6 monosaccharide, these are the hexoses. Now, monosaccharides is classified into 2. So we have aldose and ketoses. So what is this aldoses? These are monosaccharides that contain aldehyde functional group. So remember, at the beginning of our discussion, I have mentioned a functional group which yung nakakabulol na terms. So to make it short, the polyhydroxy, these are the aldehyde. Okay? So the aldoses, these are the polyhydroxy aldehydes. Okay? Now for the ketoses, this is a monosaccharide which contains ketone functional group, and these are the polyhydroxy ketones. Okay, so these have a 5 carbon monosaccharides with a ketone functional group which is called a ketopentose. So take note that monosaccharides are usually classified by both their numbers of carbon atom and the functional group that are included. So a 6 carbon monosaccharide with an aldehyde functional group, these are called aldohexose. Okay, so guys, I want you to take note of this. No? These are also found in your reference book. So, biochemically important monosaccharides. Take note that of many monosaccharides, there are 6 that are particularly important in the functioning of the human body. These are D-triose D-glyceraldehyde and the dihydroxyacetone and the D form of glucose, galactose, fructose, and ribose. Okay? Glucose and galactose, these are aldohexose. Fructose, these are ketohexose. Ribose, these are the aldopentose. All the 6 of monosaccharides, these are all water-soluble white crystalline solids. So let us discuss this biochemically important monosaccharide further. So we have here the D-glyceraldehyde and the dihydroxyacetone. So this is the simplest form of monosaccharide. So the D-glyceraldehyde, this is actually a simple aldehyde, while the dihydroxyacetone, this is a simple ketones. So the D-glyceraldehyde, this actually has a chiral center, which has a 2 enantiomers, while the dihydroxyacetone, this does not show any chirality. Okay, so a series of reaction whereby glucose is converted into 2 molecules of pyruvate. D-glyceraldehyde is chiral molecule, but again, dihydroxy is not. D-glyceraldehyde and dihydroxyacetone, these are an important monosaccharide in carbohydrate metabolism. Okay, so let us move on to D-glucose. Of all monosaccharide, D-glucose is the most abundant in nature, and this is the most important from a human nutritional standpoint. Okay, so this is its Fisher rejection formula. So please take note of this. There are 2 other names for D-glucose. So what are this? This is the dextrose and blood sugar. The name dextrose draws attention to the fact that the optically active D-glucose in aqueous solution rotates plain polarized light to the right. The term blood sugar, which draws attention to the fact that blood contains dissolved glucose. Okay, take note of that. Another, the normal concentration of glucose in human blood is in the range of 70 to 100 milligrams per DL. There are 2 important hormones. So we have insulin and glucagon. Okay, so these 2 have an important role in keeping glucose blood concentration within a normal range. So, itong dalawang hormone na to, importante siya para ang glucose sa ating body ay manormalize. So, this is required for normal body function. Now, abnormal functioning of the hormonal control process for blood glucose level, this leads to condition which is known as diabetes. Uncontrolled glucose in our body, this leads to a disease which is known as diabetes. Okay, so next we have is the D-galactose. So this is the Fisher projection of the D-galactose, the enantiomer structure. So D-galactose and D-glucose, these are epimers. So what are epimers? These are diastereomers that differ only in the configuration at one chiral center. Okay, so D-galactose in human body. So this is synthesized from glucose in mammary glands for the use mammary glands for the use in lactose. So these are the milk sugar. D-galactose is sometimes called the brain sugar because it is a component of glycoprotein found in brain and in nerve tissue. D-galactose is also present in chemical markers which distinguish various types of blood, which is the A, B, AB, and O. Next is the D-fructose. This is also a biochemically important ketohexose. D-fructose is also known as levulose and fruit sugar. Okay, so D-fructose is known to be the sweetest tasting of all sugar. So this is found in many fruits, and it is also present in honey, which also have an equal amount of glucose. And sometimes ginagamit natin siyang alternative for glucose used as dietary sugar. Okay, so bakit? It is not because that it has a fewer calories per gram than other sugar, but because it is less needed. So ibig sabihin, mas konti yung gagamitin mong sugar pag ang ginamit mo is fructose kasi mas matamis siya. Unlike glucose, mas madami kang ilalagay kasi hindi pa niya nare-reach yung certain sweetness na gusto mo. Okay, so next we have the D-ribose. D-ribose is a pentose. So this is a component of variety of complex molecules, including the ribonucleic acid and energy-rich compounds such as adenosine triphosphate. The compound 2-deoxyribose is also important in the nucleic chemistry. Next, we have cellobiose. Now, cellobiose is now part of polysaccharide sugar. So, it is produced as an intermediate in the hydrolysis of polysaccharide cellulose like maltose cellobiose contain 2-D-glucose monosaccharide unit. It differs from maltose in that one of the D-glucose unit, the one functioning as hemiacetal, it must have a B configuration instead of A configuration for maltose. Next is sucrose. Now, sucrose is the most common table sugar. This is the most abundant of all disaccharide and it occurs throughout the plant kingdom. It is produced commercially from the juice of sugarcane and sugar beets. Sugarcane contains up to 20% by mass sucrose and sugar beets contains up to 17 by mass sucrose. So far, that is the whole coverage of our carbohydrate. Now, included in these slides, these are some of the concepts to remember. For some of you who cannot access the books or the reference books clearly, yung nahihirapang mag-access sa book, ito po yung almost all of the coverage ng mga important key points na kailangan. In your book, you will be able to find chapter 18 carbohydrates, but it is a very long chapter. So the purpose of our PowerPoint and recorded lecture is for you to have most or almost all of the key points that are important para makover natin ang kailangan for our subject. So these are some concepts to remember. You can read this on your own. I will be uploading this PowerPoint. Okay, thank you everyone for listening.